morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be dialing in from around the world. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. The time is now for Buy Side to Review Technology and Operating Models, presented by Dados Insights. I'm Caitlin Labby, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We'll be starting the webinar shortly, but first, let me just cover a few quick housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a link to view the recording on demand will be available and sent to you after the session. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to submit your questions using the questions feature located in the GoToWebinar toolbar to the right of your screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Gavin Littlegill and Paul Centeno. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you for taking time on a early Thursday morning in the East Coast, and for those of you in Europe and other areas of the world, your late afternoons and evenings. My name is Gavin Littlegill, and I'm delighted to kick today's presentation off. You know, when Paul and I sat down and said, what do we want to talk to folks about? We said, look, let's take a look at the questions that we're getting from firms today. And we talked to institutions out there in the marketplace. What they're saying is a need to think about how they communicate, how they create the impetus within their organization to drive change. How do you get the people on board? How do you get the organization on board? How do you get the funding associated with implementing changes and to drive that sense of urgency through the organization to really think about not just individual applications, but really the broader technology and operating models. When we talk to vendors out there in the marketplace, they ask us much of the same. How do I stop and create a sense of urgency, right? When I'm talking to those, to the institutions that I'm targeting, I know I have a better mousetrap is what I hear all the time. How do I convince them that this is the time where they actually need to look at those, at evaluating their current technology against the capabilities that we can offer? And that was really the genesis of this presentation today. When I think about this, setting the stage for this webinar, you know, what I want to do is sort of talk about what's happening out there in the marketplace. What are those broader changes that are happening within the industry? And then what are sort of the enabling technologies, or what are those market dynamics across technology, the evolution of the service provider, M&A activity, and then just broader internal drivers for change? You know, what are those things that are happening within institutional asset management firms and institutional asset owners that are really pushing for that change? And finally, where do you go next, and what are those next things? And as part of that, we want to do is talk a little bit about how we have supported our existing client base with some of our capabilities, and how do clients use us to sort of think about their broader evaluating both their technology and operating models. So with that said, let me start by helping to sort of set the stage. My name is Gavin Littlegill. As I said, I run both the securities and investments practices here, and I want to take the moment to introduce Paul Centeno to kick things off and introduce himself. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Gavin, and again, welcome to everyone who's joined this webinar today. I'm a strategic advisor within the capital markets team, so we oversee the research and advice to our institutional buy-side clients as well as the wider capital markets firms. I focus mainly on the buy side with my time, and that's looking at the range of technologies from order management down to investment fund accounting, client reporting. And we have teams. Our team supports me in different aspects, but overall, I guess my purpose is to really have a broader view of what's going on in the buy-side space, and particularly the technology used by such firms. And I wanted to start today's webinar really talking through what's going on in the industry from a financial perspective. You know, we've seen a lot of reports over the last decade, and obviously the thinning margins that asset managers have experienced. But I wanted to really evaluate, was that still true as of 2022, and what should firms consider really when looking at this data? We released a report, our inaugural report, focused on that industry, focused on the industry this year. We took performance data from the last 5 years of 40 of the publicly listed asset management firms globally.